is up, fellow daimyos? Welcome to a brand new Book of Boba Fett episode 3 breakdown, and today's episode I thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel like this episode in particular is really getting into the meat of what this show is all about, and that is kind of, obviously, Boba being the new daimyo, but how that sends out these ripple effects, you know, since there is always and always will be quite a power struggle when it comes to control over various areas of Tatooine. We've known that ever since Jabba the Hutt. We got some more context on Bib Fortuna and how he dealt with that, and with Boba, as pointed out in this episode, nobody really respects him, even if they know of his history as the famous bounty hunter Boba Fett. This really opened the doors for how he needs to assert his power, how he wants to do that in a very unusual way, and that is with respect, and some people don't respect that. And yeah, I just felt like this episode really went leaps and bounds beyond, and I'm kind of very happy that we've got a Rancor now. If you've been watching my reviews week to week, I've been wanting a Rancor, and they actually gave me it in probably one of the best ways. So without wasting any more time, guys, I'd really appreciate a like on this video. If you do go on to enjoy, just hit the thumbs up button. So at the very beginning of the episode, we had a little bit of a briefing from that droid talking about what I was more or less just getting into, the somewhat situation after the disaster of the barge, and that's where obviously Jabba was killed by Leia Organa, and that's when Boba went flying off into the Sarlacc pit. Obviously there was a bit of a power vacuum after then, and Bib Fortuna took control. But Bib Fortuna, he had to assert his control in a way that was a bit almost slimy, and he didn't nearly have as much control as what Jabba the Hutt did. So the way Bib Fortuna decided to deal with this was through Mos Espa being divided amongst 3 families rather than just like Jabba's singular control, such as the Trandoshans, who took the city center, the Aqualish, who then took the Workers' District, and the Klatooinians, who took the Starport and Upper Sprawl. So him relying on these uneasy alliances, as the droid put it, kind of meant that they would still somewhat offer tribute, and everyone was kind of happy, but obviously it wasn't as much of a smooth sailing ship as what Jabba had, where instead of divided families, he would have had control overall, and I think we can bet our asses that Boba Fett is after the same kind of control that Jabba had, but obviously he's just like, well, I'm going to be a good leader, but nobody quite trusts him yet, or even respects him to let him have the control that Jabba did. So overall, at the very beginning of this episode, I liked how we were getting into a bit more of the kind of family mobby kind of politics of how this is all going to go down, the context of the situation, just assessing it between Boba and Fennec Shand. As they put it themselves, everyone is somewhat waiting to see what kind of leader Boba is, and this is where we got a little bit of even more context from Lord Appeal, who is a watermonger, and he's more or less just saying like, yeah, basically there's some things that have been happening that didn't happen before you got here, and he kind of said it straight, like, nobody respects you. I am a bit like somewhat slighted by how much people are going up to Boba with a bit of audacity. Like, they should really be a lot more scared, and this came up again a bit later in the show with the new workers they got a hold of, but at the same time, I do suppose that if nobody is properly respecting his rule, people like this feel like they can say things a bit more directly, because he's not exactly seen, let alone feared, like Jabba the Hutt was. Like, I do agree that they certainly wouldn't come out and be as candid as they are with someone like Jabba, but maybe they think they can get away with it with Boba, especially as he is deciding to kind of rule without fear, but respect. He mentions to Boba that his water has been stolen by this gang of youths, and he also says that this gang is half man, half machine. Obviously quite the Vader reference there. I mean, it's a bit on the nose, but I don't mind it, because, I mean, it's kind of true at the same time, and I did quite appreciate how we saw their modifications work in the action of this episode, such as in that speeder chase later on. Not so sure how much of a fan I am of their speeders, though. I like how colorful they are, but it really did feel like they were deliberately trying to make them look like scooters or mopeds. Like, I'm sure you're seeing it on screen right now. I feel like that's a bit too out there for me. Up next, we more or less have Boba Fett going straight up to this gang of youths and just saying, like, I'm the daimyo of this sector and I will bring order. And it gets into a little bit of discussion of how, like, that there is no work when he tells them to go work instead of stealing. Due to them somewhat standing up against Boba, he acknowledges the guts that they have, and that if there is no work, then maybe you will work for me. But what I liked most about this scene, other than, you know, the fact that he's got, like, new workers now, I guess a bit more of a armed guard than just the Gamorreans and Fennec Shand, is that it showed that he is a fair ruler, and these people were questioning him, these youths, if you will. They didn't really have the respect that Boba feels like he should be getting from the people under his daimyo rule. But through this action of saying, you're going to charge this much now, give him 500 credits instead of like 13 or 1500 like he was asking for, they can see, and the reason why they probably wanted to work for him, other than, yeah, they probably needed work, is that he is fair. Whereas a Hutt would just be like, for example, later on with the Wookie, they said sell the Wookie back to the gladiator thing. And it's just like, well, no, Boba let him go. So I do like how he's being good guy Boba, but obviously at the same time, it's a lot harder to prove why you should be the ruler through something like respect, and it's a lot easier to succumb to a new leader, like, for example, Jabba, who rules through fear. Like, you often don't tend to question fear as quickly as you might question somebody who's, trying to assert themselves in a fair way, especially on Tatooine. And that's the substance of this series, and I feel like they are getting it across quite well in these scenes. And up next was the back-to-tank thing. I was like, blimey, we're still going back to the back-to-tank. And I think there is in-universe logic for it. It does, send them back to the flashbacks, but I do argue it doesn't have to be every single time he's in the back-to-tank. You can just do a wave over the screen and just let us have the flashbacks that way. But I guess they really are drilling in. Boba must be pretty weak. Some of you might be saying, isn't that obvious, Boba? But I'm just like, yeah, I guess. But his scars have been healed, but I suppose there is more damage underneath the surface that needs, healing more than what is apparent, and his scars just going away now. That's the way I'm going to take it. But it is low-key, just a wave back to the flashbacks. And this is where we got some interesting Kamino flashbacks. I really like how they have recreated these Kamino scenes. And it does seem, and this isn't massively surprising to me, but it's still somewhat unexpected in a way with how much gravity, the fact that when Boba was a kid, it affected him with seeing his father Django going away. I do feel like it is just, the time of wonder that he's thinking about when he was a kid, longing to know where his father's gone, where Slave One is taking off to, but they make it very apparent that it did affect him when, the child's versions of Boba's hand just goes out to the glass as Slave One flies away. Either way, just seeing the environment of Kamino again in, obviously, a new Star Wars production, and obviously it somewhat being recreated, just makes me hunger to see an episode, maybe even surrounding this location again. And I think a lot of Star Wars fans probably feel the same. It's cool getting it in flashbacks, and I'm taking my candy when I can get it, but I'm just thinking, oh man, if you can do this, can we kind of revisit some of these cool locations from the prequels? I mean, in current day, that would be pretty awesome. Granted that I don't really know why Boba would have to go back to Kamino, but you get what I'm saying. It's just seeing a location like this again is just pretty sweet. And this is where we have that moment where he leaves the Tuskens, and I was thinking in my last review, I was like, how much more of this do we have to go? It did feel like more or less they were edging the precipice of the end of the Tusken story last episode when he got his staff. He's more or less got the equipment and setup that he has in The Mandalorian. This is when he leaves them to go to Mos Eisley, and he talks to some Jawas to ask where the Pikes are and where they do their business. And I do like how they're setting up in the flashbacks, considering what we learn at the end, with the Pikes basically wanting to assert their own control over Boba's whole new daimyo sector. Well, it is cool how in these flashbacks we're setting up some existing history with Boba, and this is where we got that meeting with the Pike, somewhat leader of this sector, in how Boba is here to take payment for what is to be, the protection that he set up between the Tuskens of the Dune Sea and the Pikes doing their business. Like, as the Pike somewhat leader here said, it is a very normal thing to secure a business of safe passage and stuff, but it turns out that somebody else had already collected the payment for safe passage in that area that Boba Fett had previously set up at the end of last episode. And that is none other than the Kintan Striders, those friggin' bastards who were out at Toshi Station, who Boba absolutely wrecked in the previous episode, and what they did to the Tusken Raiders. We will just get to that. And before I forget as well, we also had a little bit of a cameo when Boba was riding in on the Bantha to Mos Eisley. We actually saw Peli Motto, and you may remember her from The Mandalorian. Remember when the Mando Din Djarin needed some maintenance on the Razor Crest, and she was there with her little freaking droid helpers from the prequels? Well, she was walking in the background. I'm pretty sure most people spotted that, but I just thought I'd chuck it in here. Either way, though, the Pike representative of Mos Eisley did say, well, whatever, really, I'm happy to do business with either you or the freaking swoop bike gang. And that's where, like, Boba was like, you won't have to worry about the Kinton Striders anymore. And he goes back to more or less sort them out, since he also pointed out that my freaking Tusken lads and ladies, far outnumber them. But he returns back, and this was a lot more sad than what I thought it would be. And it's not like I didn't connect to Boba finding this somewhat unexpected community for himself amongst these people. But I didn't think that I would be as sad as I was when he returned back to the camp and they were all dead. It is just a shame, because I understand why they died. I suppose when it comes to them versus the Kinton Striders, who not only have bikes, but they probably came back with even more of a vengeance after being humiliated by Boba at Toshi Station Bar or whatever. They have guns, and ultimately they probably coordinated this attack and wanted to wreck them. And since Boba wasn't there, it made it even tougher. It's just really sad when you take into account how not only was their place burned, they seem to be like kind of, piked up on, certain parts, like Tuskens were like pinned up. It was just pretty horrific to see. And just seeing Boba Fett somewhat burn the bodies. And I believe one of the last staves that he put on the fire was the little staff from the little kid. And that just breaks my heart. Like, I'm a sucker for things like this. Not to mention, right at the beginning of the episode, before Boba left and got on the little bantha that they lent him to go to Mos Eisley, you see that they do a very deliberate shot of the kid, almost. You can't see the expression of sadness, but he was sad to see Boba go. He like stood up, or he was looking at him as he was going on his way, and that kid died. And you can tell that really saddened Boba, because of the last little staff they put on there was most likely the 10-year-old Tusken child that we've seen in all the prior episodes. But I knew this would mean vengeance. Like, I cannot wait to see that scene where he just unleashes hell on them. And this is probably, if you bring the context of what we didn't see this episode, because by the way, I thought we'd maybe see another flashback to where he does go after them, but they're evidently still saving those back to tank flashbacks for the next episode, and maybe the next episode. This is where we were brought back to present day, and I didn't necessarily expect this, but we had Boba freaking just yeeted out of his bacta tank by Chrysanthe. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I always butcher it, but I'm just going to just refer to him as the Wookie, or I suppose he does have nicknames, but, Chrysanthe was just going ham. And I was so happy that they showed this. And I said last episode, and I think it goes without saying anyway, that we would see a face-off between these two. And my God, we did. It was like David versus Goliath. I think considering Boba is just a human at the end of the day, he was putting up with a lot. Like, there were so many times when the Wookiee, shall I just say, was completely grabbing him and bitch slapping him across the room. And I'm glad that they didn't pull the punches there, because a Wookiee is insanely powerful. We had moments where Boba tried to do like these MMA takedowns on him. Like, I was like, wow, this is brave. You're trying to like go under the legs and, just proper like take the Wookiee down. But Chrysanthe just literally like grabbed him and just launched him, and you would like smash his head into the wall, or you'd be thrown back and bitch slapped into the bacta tank. And I was thinking, like, you are kind of putting up with a lot and still getting up. Like, by the end of the fight, despite being thrown and thrown and thrown again and again, he just arrived back into that throne room once, Chrysanthe was in the Rancor pit with a bathrobe, putting it back on, and he's just like, you're right. He just seemed kind of good for what he just went through, considering he still needs bacta tank healing. So overall, I find this fight really, really awesome. Not to mention the knuckle dusters that were like fused with electricity, or how we had Chrysanthe like just grab Boba and start to crack his bones. Like, truly, a Wookiee is not to be messed with. And I do have a few issues with this in general that, some people may not care about, but I think it is fairly valid to say, like, how did a Wookiee how did a Wookiee get past any of the security? There were Gamorrean guards who just came in halfway through the fight. And not only that, his new posse of youths, shall we say, the cyborg augmented gang that he recruited, they came in. And, sure, you could say they were somewhere else, but like, I'm just thinking a Wookiee is kind of hard to miss. And I know he's a bounty hunter, but I do have to bring up the point that isn't it convenient that he made it in there, and then you had the Gamorrean guards come in, or should I say, maybe was it the gang first, and then the Gamorreans came in? I don't know, but either way, they all came in when it was almost too late. I personally would have had maybe some of them still come in, but I would have liked to have seen Boba maybe take out the Wookiee, because my only issue with this is that if they didn't come in after conveniently letting Chrysanthe walking all the way up to the Bacta tank, which is, I think, quite problematic, then Boba would have died, because we had that moment where he was being cracked, and if they didn't come in that moment, he would have been dead. I think it would be more tasteful to show how much more of a badass Boba Fett is than even a Wookiee. Like, he managed to pull off saving his own skin by maybe taking down chrysanthe himself. As I said, maybe chuck the new people in there, or maybe chuck in a Gamorrean guard, maybe they get wrecked, or just maybe they allow him an opportunity to take out chrysanthe. But yeah, despite being thoroughly entertained by this fight, I just probably would have handled it a little bit differently. There was a few conveniences, one too many I think for me, but overall, still really awesome. And of course, he happened to be standing on top of the Rancor tiny trapdoor, so he went down there, and I thought, yeah, you're kind of screwed now, you can't really get out of there. But then, it turns out the twins are here, and this is where we get the larger context of the story, with how they don't even think this is worth trying to, like, battle Boba over the daimyo position anymore, because there is something, like, they've both been lied to. The mayor was actually really up to something else, and that is facilitating the Pike's control, like, and how they are coming full force. Like, they want this place so much, they are willing to basically go to war, and that was just the first wave that arrived off of that ship at the end of the episode. Now, I like how they kind of came to apologize, because I saw it as a little bit of a, oh crap, like, I know we sent chrysanthe, this big-ass bounty hunter Wookiee, to kill you, but we've kind of, like, changed our mind, maybe even between when he was killing you, that we've realized the Pikes are coming, so we're gonna just go back to Hutt now. But here's a gift anyway. We hope that you don't try and kill us. Take this Rancor. And I love how it's like a calf Rancor, if you know what I mean. And we even got Danny Trejo here as the Rancor keeper. That's awesome. I trust a lot of you know who he is, so it's a nice cameo for him to appear in this episode as, I guess, the guy who we're going to see a bit more of, since Boba Fett seems to be very, very, very fond of this Rancor, and this is why I'm so happy. Don't ask me why I have such a fascination with Rancors, by the way. Maybe I just think it's such a great Star Wars beast that I've not only encountered in this show, but in a lot of Star Wars media, that I'm just really happy through me expressing each episode how I've wanted a Rancor down in the Rancor pit. We're getting kind of more than what I ever imagined. Like, Boba's really fond of this Rancor. They're going to help train it. Boba's really keen on getting to ride this Rancor. And that's when they took the, I guess you could say, Rancor blindfold off, and yeah, basically saw Dad. And that was quite cute, because I like how Danny Trejo's character said before Boba left to go see the mayor, he's like, don't worry, he'll be back. And you saw the Rancor just like, Dad, please. You know, I'm looking forward to this, and you just know that this is long-term set up for, let's just say there's a big kind of standoff between the Pikes in a couple of episodes' time, and Boba Fett and whatever forces he's amounted, that there's going to be a big-ass Rancor, like that he's riding into battle. And that's just going to be epic to behold, I'm sure. Now, when Boba was releasing chrysanthe, I was wondering if he was going to stay with them, because the Hutts obviously were like, sell him as like a slave to the arenas or whatever. But he was just kind of like, the hell? Like, I'm just going to, and he starts running off. But I wonder if he's going to be helpful in maybe Boba's struggle against the Pikes, with the power struggle that is yet to come. Like, a war is coming, basically. So it'd be cool to see chrysanthe not exactly proper ditch all of this and maybe actually choose to come back. Either way, he makes his way to the mayor's office, since there wasn't meant to be an appointment for like another 20 days, very obviously, but Boba is not taking any shit anymore. Goes to the mayor's right-hand man, he starts escaping. Turns out the mayor isn't even there anymore. He's obviously somewhere else, anticipating all of this fallout. And this was when it turned into a little bit of a chase. This was quite comedic at times. The action was decent, but the comedy being like that little protocol droid just getting stuck like C-3PO and kind of glitching out. There was a painting of Jabba that got burst through. Again, not a massive fan of all of the speeders. I like how they were colorful. It kind of reminded me of like what Sabine from Rebels would kind of do to ships or whatever. However, I do feel like some of the models literally look like a Vespa kind of, you know, actual moped. And I don't know, it just didn't really seem to fit for me. But again, you may have loved that. One thing that I was a bit disappointed about is, like, at the end, we saw Boba Fett arrive after the mayor's right-hand dude was basically, you know, he was stuck. He couldn't start his speeder anymore. He arrived on this jetpack, and I thought it would have been cool production to have seen him fly above the roofs and, like, you know, monitoring the situation. I know that might be a limit of budget or whatever, but you could have put him in front of a green screen and just floating. I do feel like, considering we are 3 episodes in, I would like to see Boba use his jetpack rather than, oh, final frame, him coming down and being like, got you now. It just reminds me of the episode when him and Fennec Shand were closed in that circle, and I argue, oh, you could have used your jetpack to go up and provide air support to those people with the shields and who kept poking. It's just I feel like they're not utilizing the jetpack, and that is second nature to Boba Fett. But anyway, as I've kind of already teased, this is when the Starliner arrives with a bunch of pikes now arriving to basically assert their control of Boba Fett's territory. They want to be the ultimate daimyo, if you will. One of Boba Fett's new workers obviously reported that back to them, and Fennec Shand warns them that this is just the first wave and they're going to war, and Boba says they're going to be ready. As I said, they're probably going to get the Rancor ready, but they're going to have to find more people, because if you think about it just for a second, other than the couple of Gamorreans and Fennec Shand, how protected is this palace? Because other than, yeah, 2 Gamorreans, maybe there were more, I can't remember, other than Fennec Shand, other than the new workers he's got now, they could kind of just roll their way in there. I mean, that's a lot of pikes, and that's just the first wave. So Boba really needs to get some forces, because I argue, before he even got the new workers in this episode, those kids with like the, you know, the cool colorful speeders or whatever, it was just Fennec Shand and the 2 Gamorreans or whatever. So you could argue those Hutts could have got a lot of forces and just ransacked the palace, but it still yet remains to be seen. So overall, I'm happy with this episode. It was very entertaining, and I'm just looking forward to see where things go, especially as the tension is very much so rising with Boba's daimyo claim to this territory and how people are rejecting that, and now it's just getting bigger and bigger. Let me know your thoughts on this episode, everyone, down in the comments below. Any theories as to where you think this could really go? Something unexpected maybe, because right now I feel like it's fairly predictable and straightforward, but I am expecting, because of that, some surprises and unforeseen things to happen. Make sure you subscribe to see a review every single week, and maybe you'll be interested in some of my other videos on the channel. We cover a lot here. But other than that, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow daimyos in the next video. Goodbye.